So being kings and queens of our own castle sounds good. I mean, after all, we get to choose, we get to decide, we get to manage. It's our stuff, and we're large and in charge, and who doesn't want that? How's that working out for you? Because it creates a lot of stuff in our lives, too. We want to choose, but sometimes our choices create chaos. We want to make our own decisions, but sometimes we end up getting caught in such mess sometimes. Love the idea, don't we, that man, I get to decide. I'm the one. It is on me. So how is that working out for you? You know, we all come into the room and we are in different places. Now, we're pretty good as we walk through the parking lot and out in the lobby and seated next to somebody to act like, well, you know, hey, life is good, we're fine. But the truth is we're in a whole bunch of different places. There are some of us, for example, spiritually. There are some who maybe we're here this morning because we're just trying to sort out, is there really a God out there? Or how come things have gone spiritually dry for me? Or is there something I can connect with that makes a difference in my life? Or maybe for some of us, we're spiritually longing for something. We're trying to sort out, does this really somehow work in my life? Can I have this connection with God? And there are others who've come in this morning because we gather together and the encouragement and honoring Christ is a big deal to us and it matters, and we get to do that as we come in this place. We're all over the map spiritually. We're not all in the same place. I suppose physically that'd be true as well. There's some of you that you're going, man, I am feeling great about me right now. I love my life. I love what's happening. I like where I'm at. And others, you're struggling with some health issue, or maybe you're not feeling good about where you are physically at the moment, or you got some challenge happening for you. And emotionally, we're all in different places. Some of us are having like the greatest time of our life. I mean, it is all sunshine and mountaintops, and there are others who are in a dark hole somewhere and not sure how we're going to get out of that. And we're really good at pretending that everything is fine, but the truth is, stuff is going on in our lives, all of us. And if it's not happening now, it will sometime. And so we're in this series on 7 deadly sins, and we're looking at the results, the issues of sin. Sin is sin, but there are consequences that are a bigger deal with some sins than other sins, aren't there? So we've been talking about that list and how it came about. It was in the mid-centuries when the Catholic Church was looking for ways to impact spiritually. Now, if you grew up in a Catholic tradition or Orthodox tradition, the 7 deadly sins are familiar to you in a lot of ways. I grew up in upstate New York, and while we didn't attend church, we had kind of a nominal Catholic connection. But in New York, you grew up thinking you're Italian and Catholic whether you are or you aren't anyway. So these 7 deadly sins were kind of informing. They were out there. And this list came about because these were sins that carried a lot of weight with them. Not in weight in how they broke our relationship with God, but weight in how they break our relationship with each other and the consequences and chaos that results out of these particular sins. They're trigger sins. They trigger other stuff in our lives as well. Anger and envy, gluttony, lust, pride, greed, sloth, or laziness. Those sins that trip us up. That's why the Bible says, and the sin that so easily entangles us, because it does, doesn't it? Something that starts out as something we want to do, our choice. We can do it. It is our castle. We're king. We're queen. So how is it working out for you? And this issue of gluttony shows up in our lives in a lot of ways, and not always in the pictures that we have about it. In fact, these 7 deadly sins throughout the centuries have had impact on music and art and culture and even stuff you and I watch on television. One of the shows that I loved watching when I was a little kid, was Gilligan's Island. Now, that's going to date like some of us in the room. And Gilligan's Island, actually, the producers kind of based some of it around the 7 deadly sins. Look, you got the professor who was pride. He was going to solve everything. He knew the answers. And you got the Howells back there, who was the rich guy. Who takes a boatload of money on a boat with him like that, on a little cruise. And his wife was lazy. She never wanted to help out anywhere, do anything. And you got Ginger, the glamour sex queen. And you got lust involved there. And you got envy for Marianne, who wanted to be like Ginger. And then anger came from the captain, who was always whacking Gilligan on the head. And the glutton in the group was actually Gilligan, the skinniest guy on the island. Because our picture is that somehow this has to do with, like, all the images we have are these kind of the Jabba the Hutt kind of stuff, they're kind of drooling food out of the side of our mouths. But gluttony is bigger than that. There's real stuff that happens as a result of gluttony. Writer of Proverbs says it this way, because it does include food and drink. Listen, my son, and be wise. Set your heart on the right path. Do not join those who drink too much wine or gorge themselves on meat, for drunkards and gluttons become poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. Well, food issues are big deal issues to us. I saw a cartoon a couple weeks ago. It was one of those sandwich board signs standing out in front of a restaurant. A guy was reading it. Here's what it said. We specialize in meals that leave you bloated and lethargic, followed by self-loathing. And then the bubble over the guy's head said, I liked it better when they called it comfort food. And that's me. I love comfort food. Jesus got the title from his critics as a drunkard and a glutton. Now, you remember from our neighboring series why he got that title, because he relationally invested, and so he was often at meals or parties with people. He was engaged with them relationally, but his critics were saying, look, he is just a glutton. He is just a drunkard. Gluttony certainly has to do with food, but it is much more than that as well. But we see it focused around food, don't we? So the picture is food, but gluttony is anything that you and I due to an excess that gets control of some of our head space, gets control of some of our heart space, gets control of how we end up living and action, and creates some results in our lives that we aren't always thrilled with. So it's true, I can be a glutton with food. I can be a glutton with work. I can be a glutton with shopping, with exercise, with sex, with alcohol. There are a lot of things that I can be a glutton with. In other words, that I do those things in excess in a way that they get control of me. And there are a whole lot of us in the room that have experienced being gluttons. For me, it hasn't been food, even though I'm kind of a comfort food eater, and I'm one of those recreational eaters, actually. Here's what happens for me. I was on a weight gain program in my 20s and couldn't gain a pound. So I had that thing going on, which has been a struggle in our house because Diane isn't wired the same way. And my idea of like, hey, we're bored, let's go eat. Let's go out for dinner. And so I developed incredibly bad habits around eating. I mean, I could eat at midnight. I could have like wolf down a pizza. And then a couple of years ago, something happened. Not exactly sure what, but things have shifted. So for me, it wasn't that it was showing up, but the truth was I was a bit of a glutton that way. But where gluttony has really hit me has been around work. For me, I found value, I found worth, I found identity, I found success, I found some temporary way to deal with stress and boredom in my life by working. Didn't have a lot of hobbies, just like to work. Could get by without a lot of sleep, so I would work. Diane's been out of town this week, and I catch it tripping me up. It's like 3 a.m, and I'm like still working. If I'm not careful, it gets control of me. You see, gluttony is about anything that we do to an excess, anything that we do that starts creating issues in our life. And those issues are almost always seen around relationship side of stuff, aren't they? Where it creates havoc for us in our lives. Because this issue of gluttony is really an issue of control. What's in charge? Who's in charge? What's managing us? Paul, the apostle, gives a warning for us. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. If you have your Bibles there, I want to invite you to turn this and underline this. Here's what he says down in verse 12. He said, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. You hear what Paul is saying? He's saying, hey, there are a lot of things that are actually okay for me to do. There are a lot of things that aren't actually bad stuff for me to do. They might even be good things for me to do. There's a lot of things that I could do, but not all of those things are beneficial. And when those things begin to get control of me, they create havoc. He said, I won't be mastered by anything. I may have freedom to choose, but my choices can get the best of me. If you go on and read what else he says here, he kind of even goes a little deeper and further. I'm going to pick it up in the Message. Just because something is technically legal doesn't mean that it's spiritually appropriate. If I went around doing whatever I thought, whatever I thought I could get by with, I'd be a slave to my whims. You know the old saying, first you eat to live and then you live to eat. Well, it may be true that the body is only a temporary thing, but that's no excuse for stuffing your body with food or indulging it with sex. Since the master honors you with a body, honor him with your body. Now, here's what he's saying. There are things that are important to us. There are things that are necessary in our lives. There are things that matter in our lives. He talks about food and sex as two of those things. He said, but those are also two things that when they are in excess, they can create havoc with us. Are we honoring God with our bodies? God has honored us. Are we honoring him? Are we making the appropriate choices? Are we creating boundaries for ourselves? Or are we allowing some things to get out of control for us in a way that they begin to control us? If the stats are correct, in the U.S., we have huge issues going on with our consumption of food. Over half of American adults are overweight and don't exercise, and 1/3 of children today are landing in that overweight or obesity thing. We're consuming more calories than we ever have in the history of measuring stuff. My foreign friends, when they come to visit, they are stunned by the size of our portions. I had a friend from Vietnam here a couple months ago. We were sitting down, we ordered our food, and his plate got delivered out first, and he said, "Is this for the table?" Nope, bud, that's all yours. Somebody sent this to me a couple weeks ago. I love what it says here. And God populated the earth with broccoli and cauliflower and spinach and green and yellow vegetables of all kinds, so man and woman would live long and healthy lives. And he saw that it was good. And then Satan created McDonald's, which brought forth the 99-cent double cheeseburger. And Satan said to the man, "You want fries with that?" And the man said, "Supersize it." And God created yogurt that humans might stay in good shape, but Satan froze the yogurt and brought forth chocolate fudge and chocolate chips and sprinkles. And then God said, "Try some crispy fresh salad," and Satan brought forth creamy dressing, bacon bits, croutons, and shredded cheese. God brought forth a potato, a vegetable naturally low in fat and brimming with nutrition, and Satan peeled off the skin and sliced it into chips and deep fried them. And he created onion dip as well. And Satan saw it and said, "It is good." And man went into cardiac arrest, and God created quadruple bypass surgery, and Satan created HMOs and Obamacare. Don't send me an email. The truth is, health issues are soaring around at our food stuff, isn't it? Heart disease is a big deal, and we do have a heart disease when it comes to these 7 deadly sins. Are we honoring God with our bodies? So in a practical way, am I paying attention to what I eat? Am I exercising? You hear me talk about that. I really don't like doing that, but I've been trying to be better, and recently I've lost 20 pounds, and I'm trying to figure out how is it I can pay attention. How am I honoring God with what I eat and drink and what I do? Is God being honored in my life? Addiction issues are costly. Alcohol and drug and all the other things that get a hold of our lives. And the chaos that gets created with those things. Because here's what's happened. We do something and it meets a need for us, whether it's food or drink or some other thing we do, and we're bored or we're depressed or we got this hole in our heart, and so we do this thing and it makes us feel pretty good. In fact, it gives us a lift, and then we do it again, and we get another lift, and then we have to do more of it to get the same kind of lift, and then more, and all of a sudden now we're not controlling it is controlling us, and recovery issues are big deal issues, and there's a whole bunch of us in the room that have been challenged by that, either personally or with family or friends. The impact is significant. And almost all the impact actually boils down to relationship impact, doesn't it? How this trades off not just in our life, but how somebody else gets marked by those issues. We aren't happy, we take it out. Lifestyle choices negatively impact the people around us. And so if gluttony is one of the deadly sins, then what is the life-giving virtue? And the Bible says it's self-restraint. That's what actually Paul is talking about here in Corinthians. It is choosing. It is saying, hey, I'm going to create some boundaries. I'm going to create some accountability. I'm going to create some barriers for me. I know I could do this, but I'm going to choose not to do this. And that's a challenge for us. Not easy to do. My friends who are sober and clean have discovered that along the way for them to deal and maintain their sobriety takes some effort on their part. There's some work, there's some intentionality about that. There are places and things that they know I can't be around that or a part of it. There are some choices they know that I need to kind of rein in. I know what happens when halt happens in my life. If you're a 12-stepper, you know the language where I get hurt or angry, lonely or tired. I'm vulnerable. I'm open to stuff that's going to suck me back into the same hole I was in before. Gluttony happens in a lot of ways in our lives. God is inviting us to show some self-restraint. It's interesting in the Bible how many references that God makes to himself or is made about God that have to do with food and drink, actually. Psalm 34:8, David says, taste and see that the Lord is good. The Apostle Peter said, desire the sincere spiritual milk of the word. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Come to me and you will not hunger. It was the prophet Isaiah quoting God who said, come everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. And what God was talking about was this connection to him, letting him fill that spot in our heart, letting him be what we choose. Jesus said it like this, everyone who drinks this water is going to be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. In other words, here's what the Bible encourages us. There are a lot of things that you and I are chasing, hunting, looking, longing for to fill our lives, to make us feel better, to deal with some issue, to compensate for something going on. And God is saying, come to me. All that other stuff is going to leave you wanting. All that other stuff you're going to have more of. All that other stuff is going to eventually get control in your life. And come to me and find in me that settledness and that peace that comes. But in the room, we deal with a lot of stuff, and those are big deal things for a bunch of us. Those giants that rumble across our landscape that we struggle with. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, there's a great scene in the Bible that whether you've ever been to church before, you know the story. It's about David and Goliath. You remember the story? It's a young boy, teenager, late teens. His older brothers are serving in the military. His dad sends them off to see how they're doing. How are things doing? He sends some bread and cheese along with him. He really just wanted to get a report on how the kids were. David gets there, and the Israelite army is locked down, and they're in this battle that's about to occur, and it's in the valley of Elah. When you've been, if you've ever been there, when we take the groups to Israel, so here's kind of a very cool place to see how this might have worked out. On the one hillside were 500,000 Israelites ready to do battle. On the other hillside, their enemy, the Philistines, 500,000 of them. But here's what was happening. There was a giant called Goliath, a huge man who would walk down into the valley every morning and every night for 40 days, and he would taunt the Israelites, and he would say, instead of us just slaughtering each other, send down your best warrior. Whoever wins, the other side gets all, that side wins all the plunder. And the Israelites were frozen in fear. David shows up. And you know the story. David ends up convincing Saul, the king, he can go do this. And he goes down in the valley, and, his little kids sing the song. He picks up 5 stones, puts one in a sling, whips it around a few times, whaps the giant in the head, bam, chops his head off. Great story. If you like chopped head stories, I guess. That's like another deadly sin we'll probably talk about sometime. But David did a couple things that we should do if we're going to deal with the giants in our lives. Verse 32, David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine, this giant. Your servant will go and fight him. First thing he did was acknowledge there was a giant there. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. There's a whole bunch of us that need to look in the mirror and get honest about some of the stuff that's controlling our lives right now. There's a whole bunch of us that ought to listen to some of the people around us who are saying to us, hey, do you think you might have a problem with? There's a whole bunch of us that ought to look back at the last week, the last month, and some of the stuff that's gone on and ask ourselves some honest questions. What was causing that? And the first thing we can do is face up to the giant we got. Not just ignore him, not just pretend. The second thing he did, and I'd never seen this in this passage before until a few years ago, and to me it's a key thing that he ends up doing. It's down in verse 25. Now the Israelites have been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He'll also give him his daughter in marriage, and he will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. In other words, whoever goes down into that valley and takes on the giant, if he wins, he gets like a boatload of cash. He gets no taxes, not only for him and his family for the rest of his life, and he gets to marry the princess. Not a bad deal. And look what happens. David said to the guy standing near him, what did he just say? What's going to be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? He gets cash, no taxes, and a princess. If you're going to deal with the giants in your life, you ought to keep your eye on the princess. You ought to see what it might look like if that giant didn't exist in your life. What does that look like? What would your life look like right now? If that thing you're doing battle with wasn't there anymore. What would happen in your relationships? What would happen in your own heart and mind if that giant were gone? Because the truth is, if we're going to battle the giants, we actually need to hang in and see a bigger picture. What would my life look like if I didn't have to deal with this? I need to keep my eye on the princess. Third thing he did, verse 37, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. He didn't go into that valley by himself. Can you imagine what it was like for him as he walked down that valley, and the further down in the valley he got, the bigger the giant got, until he was standing nose to kneecap? But he didn't go down there by himself. He said, I know God's going to go with me. I know that I'm not down there doing this on my own. I'm not doing this just in my own strength. Now notice that God didn't just send in a drone and take the giant out. David actually had to go down into the valley and do some battle. But he didn't go by himself. Now don't mistake. I'm not saying that if you become a Christ follower, if you get connected with God, that God's just going to zap your giants away. It might happen, but probably not. And don't mistake that if you become a Christian, that somehow you aren't actually going to even have giants to deal with. They'll just somehow no longer be in existence. That isn't true. We live in a world full of giants. And I'm not saying that if you become a Christian that you aren't going to have to deal with the consequences of the giant in your life. That somehow God's just going to kind of blank slate over. Because the truth is, some of the stuff we've done has created mess and chaos, and we got to live with the result of that. What I am saying is that you will not go into that valley on your own. What I am suggesting is that if you connect with God, He wants to help you do battle with that giant. What I would suggest to you is that God is saying to you, hey, I want to have you get this out of your life. This dark hole you've gotten in, the chaos that's been created, the stuff that is controlling your heart, I want you to give it to me, and I want to help you do battle with that. And you aren't going to do it on your own. There's going to be others who come alongside to help, and you aren't going by yourself because I'm going to be there as well. And you do have to get down in the valley and do it, because until you do, that giant will continue to rumble across your landscape every morning and every night, first thing you hear and last thing you put your head to. And so David goes. He goes in confidence. He goes knowing he's loved. He goes trusting God. And he can see what life looks like when that giant's gone. I don't know what you're challenged by. Food, shopping, sex, alcohol, drugs, exercise. Good things, bad things. I do know that those things in excess are going to screw with your life. And God is saying to you, you don't have to live with that giant.